Hey guys, welcome back to Exit Music for a Film, a podcast breaking down some of Hollywood's most recent theatrical releases. I'm your host, Ken Perry. In today's episode, it's a big one. Hey, you're Rick fucking Dalton. Don't you forget it. Today's episode, the 9th film by Quentin Tarantino, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. This has easily been the most eagerly awaited movie for me in years. Ever since I heard that Quentin Tarantino was making a movie focused on old Hollywood and the Manson murders, I was immediately obsessed and just wanted to know everything I possibly could about this movie. So much so that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was actually almost the name of this podcast. At its core, this truly is a movie about Hollywood. This film is Quentin Tarantino's love letter to the final days of Hollywood's golden age. He referred to this project throughout its creation as his magnum opus. It's definitely Tarantino's most personal and emotional film. I've never seen some sentimentality and sincerity out of Quentin Tarantino quite like this. I mean, he's touched on it somewhat with releases such as True Romance, which he wrote, as well as Jackie Brown, but there's definitely been nothing he's done that was quite this personal. It was something new, and it was very interesting to see coming out of one of my favorite filmmakers. This is his 9th of apparently 10 films that he plans to make, but who knows about that. More on that later, I guess. But my thoughts on the movie, all in all, I absolutely loved everything about the film. From the cast to the setting to the story it told, it was a total home run for me. I got what I wanted out of seeing this film, and the anticipation, it did not disappoint. And honestly, I'm excited. I haven't seen a movie twice in theaters in quite some time, but I'm definitely excited to go see it again. Now, let's start with the cast. I believe this was a great performance by Leo as insecure, aging leading man Rick Dalton in Hollywood. He was fantastic, I thought. Rick Dalton was supposed to be a star of like TV spaghetti westerns and western films, specifically the show Bounty Law, I guess, that took place in the 60s and late 50s and whatnot. He's starting to age out of being a leading man in Hollywood, and he's starting to be cast more as like a villain and the person that more young up and coming actors in Hollywood tend to beat in the films. This is basically told to him by his agent, who's played by Al Pacino, which is another fantastic role. But Leo even says himself to Brad Pitt's character Clint Booth that he said, "It's official, buddy. I'm a has-been." So we really get a good look at the insecurity Rick Dalton's feeling at this point in his career. This truly is a story of a man reflecting on his life in his career and where he's made it thus far. A thought of mine was possibly this was the focal point of the story, because maybe Quentin Tarantino's kind of feeling that way, getting towards the same age Rick Dalton's supposed to play, like I guess mid-50s. But the difference here is Quentin Tarantino certainly has no reason for insecurities whatsoever, so maybe just the reflection part of this is true. It's also been said that Rick Dalton's basically supposed to be based on Burt Reynolds, but Leo stole pretty much every scene that he was in. He had so many good scenes, from rehearsing with, or I guess just talking to a child actor on the set of a TV show he was gonna be in. The little girl was obviously fantastic. Again, more on her when we talk about the supporting cast, but the one scene that comes in my mind is when he's just beating himself up in his trailer after messing up a scene. He quotes the line, "Why'd I have to have 8 whiskey sours? It's because I'm a fucking alcoholic." Then everyone in the theater was just cracking up. That was a great scene. It was just scenes of like self-loathing and insecurity that made Rick Dalton such a fun character. Now, on the other hand, we had Brad Pitt as stuntman Cliff Booth. He was pretty much like the total opposite of Rick Dalton. He was just the definition of cool. He brought an authentic sense of calmness, like collectivism, and honestly humor. He was the funniest character in the film. He was the comic relief, pretty much. He brought this to like every scene he was involved in. I loved Pitt in this movie. Just honestly, he was completely something I noticed about him that was really interesting, and comparison to Rick Dalton. He was just completely content with being a has-been stuntman. He was completely just content with his situation in life currently. I love the team up of Leo and Pitt in this movie. Dare I use the term bromance? I saw Quentin Tarantino said, I guess in an interview, that it was the best duo, the best team up in Hollywood since Newman and Redford in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. I liked that. That was pretty big. That was pretty big shoes to fill, I would think. But I like Quentin having that type of confidence and promoting his movie in such a way, because I agree they were absolutely fantastic. I like the way you could tell that they really cared about each other and they looked out for each other. It was evident that they, both wanted the best for each other. Like, as Rick Dalton always wanted to put Booth in his movies, attempting to get him work as his stunt double. He said, "This, you're my guy. This is my guy." You could see him doing this in on the new show he was on. He's trying to convince Kurt Russell, who's playing a stunt coordinator, to just use him as Dalton's stunt double, and that he's good. He does good work. I like the line that he said, throw him through a window, hit him with a Lexus, whatever, it doesn't matter. He's down for anything. So you could tell Dalton really cared about Booth in the scene. And then obviously Booth was like pretty much a gopher for Dalton at this point in time. As you see him driving him to the tent he shoots, he's taking care of household chores, basically putting up antennas, fixing TV antennas, doing stuff around the house. And I mean, even saving him from murderous cults. Margot Robbie as Sharon Tate. I believe Margot Robbie brought a sincerity and a respect to her role as Sharon Tate in this film. I thought she did a great job portraying her, and she looked absolutely beautiful in like every scene that she was in. Tarantino, obviously, it's not a secret. He received a lot of negative feedback regarding the amount of lines that Margot Robbie received in this film. But I believe that Sharon Tate was correctly utilized in regards to what the true focus of this film was. Tate was almost like a part of the Hollywood setting of this film. And Robbie herself actually spoke out, sticking up for Tarantino, stating that she stated that she could tell Tarantino wrote Sharon Tate's role in this film from a true and deep place of admiration. And honestly, Sharon Tate's presence throughout this film, the focus on these two main characters of Dalton and Booth, it gives the audience the chance to like appreciate her for her life, as opposed to remembering her for her death, which she's unfortunately synonymous with. This is honestly, in my opinion, getting to witness Sharon Tate's life like this was one of the most special aspects of this film. Sharon Tate is unfortunately synonymous with the definition of a tragic victim. She never got to fully blossom, most importantly as a person, as a mother, but also we never got to see what her Hollywood career was going to be like. Many believe that, with her husband being Roman Polanski and whatnot, that she had a really successful and a busy Hollywood career in front of her entering the 70s. Who knows, she could have been the biggest movie star of the 70s. But unfortunately, her career was never given this time to blossom, so we'll always wonder what her movie career would have been. Margot Robbie understood the role that she took, and she understood Sharon Tate's role in this movie, and that's what's important, and I think, honestly, that ends the criticism. Everyone's fine with what it was, and, I mean, as I said before, Sharon Tate, in my opinion, was just as much as part of the backdrop of the setting to me of the Hollywood scene as she was a character in this film. Quentin Tarantino honestly restored Sharon Tate to, it was almost like she was a full living person again for 2.5, 3 hours, and I just think that was really special. Okay, so I can't say enough about the three main actors in this movie. They were absolutely fantastic. But the supporting cast was unbelievable as well. I don't know the last time I've seen a movie with such a star-studded cast from top to bottom. I guess not counting these Avenger movies that run Hollywood these days. But honestly, there's so many connections to old Hollywood and so many connections to Tarantino's career as a whole in this film, which certainly fits the narrative of this movie. I mean, this movie's the metaest of the meta films. All right, so let's just skim through this list of supporting actors here through IMDb, I guess. Shout out to IMDb. Emil Hirsch played Jay Sebring. I thought he was great. I thought he looked just like Jay Sebring. Did a fantastic job. I liked him in the very end of the movie when he met Rick Dalton, and after the break-in, I thought he was just very good. Margaret Qualley played Pussycat, who was the Manson girl that led um, Brad Pitt's Cliff Booth to Spawn Ranch. Timothy Oliphant was in it. He played James Stacy, who was apparently the real life star of Lancer, which was one of the westerns that are kind of, I guess, influenced Bounty Law. Oliphant was great. He got to have a conversation with Rick Dalton on the set, which is where we got one of the most amazing scenes in the movie. Oliphant's character talks about how Rick Dalton was up to be in Great Expectations, and following that we see Leonardo DiCaprio actually placed in Great Expectations, which was absolute fanfare for the, cinemaphile, and just people were going crazy, and that's been one of the things I've heard, the most talked about in this film. I thought that was just super cool. Julia Butters, I mentioned earlier, she played Trudy, who was the young girl on the set of, I guess, whatever this, I don't know if it was Lance or what Rick Dalton was filming, but they're just, reading, I guess, they're waiting for filming to start, and she was such a just consummate professional at like 6 years old, and you could tell she was just so much more composed and professional than Rick Dalton was, and their reaction to each other was just fantastic. They had great chemistry, Leonardo DiCaprio and young Julie Butters. I hope to see her more in films coming up because she was absolutely fantastic. She stole those scenes from Leonardo DiCaprio, honestly. Austin Butler played Tex Watson. This was my introduction to Austin Butler. I never really knew him before. Apparently, I hear that he's going to be playing Elvis in an upcoming biopic, I guess. At first, I didn't think Austin Butler looked enough like Tex Watson. I thought for some reason Tex Watson was like a huge guy with like sandy blonde hair. But when I looked at him, I thought, that's fine. He looked fine. And Tex Watson was pretty good. Obviously he had a big role to play in the final confrontation, the final showdown. He did a good job. So I'll be looking out for Austin Butler in the future. Dakota Fanning played Squeaky Fromme. She was pretty good in the short scene that she was in once Cliff Booth arrived at Spawn Ranch and he was looking for George Spawn. She was pretty good. That was cool to just note that was her in the one scene. Brings us to Bruce Dern played George Spawn. He was only in one scene, but luckily he was alive. That's what a lot of people were worried about. I heard that the role of George Spawn was apparently supposed to go to Burt Reynolds originally, and he had the part, but he unfortunately died before shooting began. But Quentin Tarantino likes to point out that Burt Reynolds played George Spawn at all the table reads before his passing, and therefore George Spawn was his last role before he passed away. Speaking of this supporting cast, maybe the biggest note is Mike Moh as Bruce Lee. Did a fantastic job. What a flex by Mike Moh, coming out of nowhere and just kicking ass as Bruce Lee. The late great Luke Perry played Wayne Maunder. I believe that's a real person. That was just another Western actor. Damian Lewis played Steve McQueen. I liked his one scene just talking about him and I guess some female were at the Playboy Mansion party talking about how Sharon Tate's just certainly has a type and she's attracted to men that look like 12-year-old boys that are masters at their craft, and how he had no shot. I thought that was a great scene, great short scene. It made me wonder if Steve McQueen actually in real life had a thing for Sharon Tate. I wonder. I mentioned him earlier. Al Pacino played Marvin Schwartz. I guess he was Rick Dalton's agent. He was fantastic. He showed up in the first, I guess, 10, 15 minutes of the movie, and he was great. He was hilarious, and just the excitement he had for the Rick Dalton films. He said him and his wife watched a Rick Dalton double feature the night before, and he just had so much charisma, almost like an old Ari Gold, I could even say. Who else do we have here? Lorenza Izzo played Francesca Capucci, who ended up being Rick Dalton's wife. Let's see. Damon Harriman, I guess, reprised, or just, I guess this was the first time he played Charles Manson, but he's also playing Charles Manson in Mindhunter Season 2. He was in one scene I could have used. I mean, the movie didn't have to focus on him completely, but I could have used just a little bit more, maybe one or two more Charles Manson scenes in this movie. Lena Dunham played Gypsy. She was probably the one that stuck out like a sore thumb the most to me. Gypsy just being another one of the Manson girls. Another Manson girl, Susan Atkins, was played by Mikey Madison of Better Things fame. She was great. She was actually definitely my favorite Manson girl in this movie, especially with her role at the end of the film. And since obviously Susan Atkins was one of the ones present at the Tate murders. Maya Hawke of Stranger Things Season 3 fame played, well, I guess credited as Flower Child, but I think she was supposed to be Leslie Van Houten, who was the one that kept a watch during the Manson murders, but smartly, unlike Leslie Van Houten, Maya Hawke asked Austin Butler playing Tex Watson for the keys to the car because she forgot something and just fucking bailed out, which in retrospect, Leslie Van Houten fucking certainly should have done in real life. I see that Stephen Smith's daughter, Harley Quinn Smith, had a part as a Manson girl. Damn, there's just so many. Let's see, who else do we have here? Rumor Willis was in it. Like I said before, this movie has so many connections to Tarantino's career, like with Maya Hawke. Her mother's Uma Thurman, starred in Pulp Fiction. Rumor Willis, her father's Bruce Willis, who was in Pulp Fiction. I like that he's just using like generations of actors in his career. Rebecca Gayheart played Billy Booth. Kurt Russell, of course, played Randy, the stunt coordinator that I mentioned before, was very against hiring Cliff Booth. And then we'll stop with Michael Madsen played Sheriff Hackett on Bounty Law. It was just a quick cameo, but Tarantino has love for Michael Madsen. He found a spot for him, and he was really good. And as an old sheriff in Bounty Law, I liked it, and it was like basically that scene opened the film. So it was good to have a Michael Madsen cameo in there. That's about it. It's quite a star-studded supporting cast, honestly, and it was so fun to just point these people out as the movie went on. I cannot say enough about how like fantastic the cast was, but I have to say that my favorite aspect overall of this film was the setting. Having this movie, take place in Los Angeles in the summer of 1969 was the absolute selling point for me. From the moment I heard, Quentin Tarantino was making this movie, and it was about the final days of Hollywood's golden age, I was immediately obsessed and tracked down any article or anything I could find on the movie. I'd just like to bring attention to Quentin Tarantino's attention to detail, which was obviously, knowing him, was absolutely expected, but his attention to detail to everything 60s, from, even when they were eating at a restaurant, I heard that Quentin Tarantino did everything he could to find even like the glasses that would be used in the specific restaurant, to like the cars, that the how the billings on the movie theaters. Everything was absolutely 60s, and I can't imagine how much, how hard it was for him to get that. But you knew that if anyone was gonna take it so seriously, it would have been Quentin Tarantino. He told a great story about the car he used. I forget what the car was, but the car he used for Cliff Booth was the same exact car that his stepfather had when he was a young man. And he said that the tracking shots as the camera sat, low in the passenger seat and focusing on Clint and just everything that was outside the windows, all the parts of Hollywood that we seen outside of the window as he was driving around the streets, was basically like what young Quentin saw as a young kid, and that blew my mind. That's just a person that absolutely loves filmmaking. And this was, not only a love letter to Hollywood, but this was a love letter to Quentin Tarantino's hometown, which I truly respect. I think that was so awesome. The soundtrack was absolutely essential to this movie, and I downloaded the soundtrack like the day after we saw the movie in theaters, and I've been playing nothing but that, since I downloaded it. Everywhere I go, that's what I'm playing, whether I'm walking or driving, feeling like Cliff Booth driving around Hollywood. But it's slowly becoming one of my favorite movie soundtracks of all time. Honestly, like there's just hit after hit. It's so cool, and just 60s music that I never was aware of. So like just highlights such as like "Ramblin' Gamblin' Man" by Bob Seger Systems, fantastic. "Hush" by Deep Purple. It's all the Paul Revere and the Raiders songs that are on that. The Circle Game by Buffy St. Marie, instantly one of my new favorite songs of all time. Mrs. Robinson by Simon and Garfunkel, a possible little Graduate tribute there. Maybe my favorite song on the whole soundtrack, "Bring a Little Lovin' by Los Bravos. Definitely playing that shit at my wedding next year, and it fucking bangs. Let's see, what else do we have here? Again, all the Paul Revere and the Raiders stuff. There's like multiple songs by them. Oh, of course, "Keep Me Hanging On" by Vanilla Fudge. That was, present in the final conflict in the film, and just hit like an absolute wall of sound. I can't say enough about the soundtrack. It was absolutely essential to the movie, and it heightened it so much, and I can't stop listening to it. They even sprinkled these old ads that I have no idea how Tarantino found them, but apparently they're real ads. But they were in the movie, but they were also sprinkled throughout the soundtrack. And they're great. They're really funny to hear and stuff. Anytime I have it on with someone else in the car, they're just like, what is this? But we've listened to this. Me and my fiance have listened to this soundtrack so many times already that we basically have a lot of these uh, short ads like memorized at this point. We laugh every time they come on in the car. But that brought such a sense of authenticity to the soundtrack, and I love that it was included on the actual release. I believe Chris Ryan on the Big Picture podcast stated that this is just simply a movie I want to live inside, and I couldn't have said it better. I could not agree more. This movie like reminded me pretty much of like Mad Men, what I loved most about Mad Men, which is my favorite period piece. Maybe up till now, maybe that's changed. I don't know. I got to see the movie again. But just it's a first-hand look into a different time. It's a first-hand look into the '60s and all the major events that it took place during this revolutionary decade. But you're accompanied by like characters you just absolutely love. All right, now let's talk about some of the scenes. I'm going to go over three key scenes, and I'm going to go in chronological order because they also go in the order of how I like them. We'll go 3 to 1. First, I have to highlight the Bruce Lee fight. Again, Mike Moh played Bruce Lee, and he was fantastic. Uh, I'm not the biggest Bruce Lee historian. I don't know much about how he was, but just seeing him hold court on the set of TV shoot was hilarious, and just talking about how he could have, basically kicked Cassius Clay's ass in a fight. That was pretty funny. He was just somewhat of a dick, which is it's not hard to believe that Bruce Lee could have been like that in real life. And just Cliff Booth coming around and basically, laughing at him and kind of shutting him up, telling him he's, all bark, no bite, or whatever he said. But just they had a short, just, friendly face off, so you can knock who on their ass. Um, Obviously, it was stopped by stunt coordinator played by Kurt Russell. But when Cliff Booth threw Bruce Lee into the car and just made that huge ass dent, that was absolutely hilarious. And it was easily one of the best scenes in the movie. My second scene is the uh, whole happenings at Spawn Ranch. There was like a 15-minute scene. If I had to describe it in one way, it was just like absolutely high tension. Cliff Booth picks up Pussycat, who he's seen around town many times, and he finally picks her up as a hitchhiker. And she says she's going to Spawn Movie Ranch, which he's familiar with because he knew George Spawn back when he was a career stuntman, and his career was more active. So he agrees to take her, and thoughts of other ideas possibly, but so he takes her to Spawn Ranch and just realizes that basically a hippie commune has formed on Spawn Movie Ranch, and he's kind of weirded out by it, and he wants to make sure that George Spawn's okay. Uh, Basically, the Manson girls start to realize that he's, I guess, not down with what's going on there, and he's concerned. So they start getting worried about how he's reacting. He finally forces his way in and realizes that George Spawn is in fact alive, maybe not alive and well, but he is alive, and he's being taken care of by Dakota Fanning's Squeaky Frome. That whole scene, I was waiting for a knife to go in Brad Pitt's back, and though it was very high tension, I have to say, I heard some people say that they thought he was going to die in that scene. I didn't think that was the case. I had no worries. I think Cliff Booth could certainly take care of himself. Seemed like quite a badass. I wasn't worried about him dying, but I certainly was on the edge of my seat throughout that whole 15-minute scene. It was a little scary. The Manson girls I think were fantastic. They seemed really authentic. They scared the shit out of me after they start getting weary of Brad Pitt there. And it was awesome to see him kick Clem's ass towards the end of that for flattening his tire. That was great to see a Manson follower, at least a guy, get what was coming to him. That was really cool, and just all the Manson girls were freaking out and screaming at Cliff Booth as he drove off. It was just it kind of just shed some light on how creepy that fucking cult was, and just how that whole Spawn Ranch scene played out, and just how they just inhabited that place. It was a really good scene. It really was definitely one of my favorite points in the movie, just due to the absolute high tension and everything. Now, this certainly isn't necessary, but I have to point out that all the foot shots were present in this movie, and this definitely was Tarantino. It was just a fuck you to the audience, saying, oh, this is what you think I always do, this is what you think I like, well, here it is, whatever. Maybe I do like it, fuck it, I don't care. Here it is. You've been waiting for it, here it is. Me and my buddy that I went to see this movie with, we were counting foot shots, actually. We started pretty early because it was pretty prevalent to, people that are up on their Tarantino filmography. It was pretty apparent pretty early on what he was doing. We started counting. I think we ended up at, 5, 6, maybe even 7 foot shots. But I just thought that was funny because I immediately was like, oh, he's doing it on purpose. It was part of the humor that just layered this film. Again, Pitt and Leo were both absolutely hilarious in this movie. It was just between the dialogue and just their actions in the final conflict. It was absolutely great. It was honestly one of Tarantino's funnier movies. I have to say my number one favorite scene was the end confrontation. So Once Upon a Time in Hollywood ended up being yet another alternate history story by Quentin Tarantino. And I think it was a good move. It was a tasteful move. As like Sharon Tate and Jay Sebring and other victims' families, they're still around, and they don't want to see the deaths of their loved ones exploited by filmmakers such as Quentin Tarantino. He did the right thing, and I feel it would have been in bad taste, honestly, for Tarantino to recreate the actual murders. Which, right when we got to that date and on Cielo Drive and we see the car pull up, I was just prepared for the absolute worst. Just knowing how the types of movies and the types of violence involved in that Quentin Tarantino is known for, I prepared myself for the absolute worst. I did not know where we were going to end up in this movie. A lot of people say they saw the alternate ending coming. Maybe I did not. I didn't know what we were going to get. Again, the film was a chance to celebrate Sharon Tate's life as opposed to recognizing her for her death. I enjoyed the ending and how it played out. I thought it was very not only it wasn't a cop out. It was a really creative move that it altered history, and honestly raises a lot of questions as a result. So Tex Watson and the Manson girls end up breaking into Rick Dalton's house as opposed to his next door neighbor Sharon Tate. This shows it's crazy how history can be changed by such like the smallest of instances. Uh, Rick Dalton's in his house and he hears the car coming up Cielo Drive and he says, "Hey, this is a closed off neighborhood. This is like a gated community. What the hell are you guys doing here?" And he thinks they're up there to smoke pot, and he threatens them and tells them to get the hell out of here. And the lives of multiple people are saved by Rick Dalton being in a shitty mood and walking out to a car full of hippies, holding in his hand a big thing of margarita mix and just telling them to get the fuck out of his neighborhood and how it's a closed off community. So he honestly he saved Sharon Tate's life. But anyways, they broke in. There's a huge conflict, and I'm not gonna even begin to try to get into the ending conflict. You guys are gonna have to see the movie, but I will say that Quentin Tarantino saved his trademark Quentin Tarantino craziness, and dare I say, use the term ultra violence for the final 15 minutes of this movie. It was very entertaining and funny. I like to think it could be referred to as like horror comedy. Like we said before, Tarantino touched on a sense of sincerity and thoughtfulness and emotion in this film, but within the last 15 minutes, we resorted right back to the true Tarantino-ness of his films, which is absolutely not a bad move because this was my favorite part of the film. Cliff and Rick saved the day along with Cliff's dog. The name of the dog escapes me at this point, but guys, you have to see this movie, and the ending conflict's absolutely my favorite part. But anyways, back to these questions that this alternate history brings about. So I'm wondering now, okay, Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, those guys, they're dead, but what does this mean for the alternate history of the Manson family? I mean, like, they're still out there. They don't get caught specifically for the murder of Sharon Tate. So what happens in this alternate history? Do they still get caught as a result of this, craziness? Obviously, the police show up and everyone's going to be on high alert. Like, there's nothing really point. I guess Cliff Booth could point to that they came from Spawn Ranch, so that's probably most likely that the cops show up at Spawn Ranch that night or the next day and takes everyone in. But I mean, there's a possibility that they're out there for longer than they were in real life. Does this cause any more murder and macabre for even more people, even more famous people? Does Manson try again the next night to go to the correct house on Cielo Drive? Who knows? But my biggest take, my biggest question of all, and this is a Ken Perry original. I haven't heard anyone else bring this up, but I'm wondering. So, uh, They break into Rick Dalton's house. Rick Dalton meets Jay Sebring. Sharon Tate invites Rick Dalton up for drinks. Cliff's in the hospital, but Rick Dalton meets Sharon Tate and goes up for drinks. Uh, Likely meets and becomes friends with Roman Polanski as well. Once he's home from Paris, does Rick Dalton steal Jack Nicholson's leading role in Chinatown 5 years later? That is the true question I ask you on this podcast today. Does he win the Oscar as Jack Nicholson did not? This, it's assumed basically that Rick Dalton starts starring in Roman Polanski films, but this is my big question that I have not heard raised yet, and I would love to ask Quentin Tarantino because I certainly know he would have an answer for me. Does Rick Dalton steal the leading role in Chinatown, and how does Rick Dalton's career play out for the next 10 years? Dying to know. At this point, I just want to give the audience another suggestion. If any of you guys are just like really intrigued with the Manson murders and you think you've heard everything there is to hear, seen every documentary, whatnot, you guys should really, if you have like an interest in that shit, you have to check out the podcast. You Must Remember This by Karina Longworth. It's a podcast focusing on the mysteries and stories of like Hollywood's first century. It's a really cool podcast, but specifically, they do seasons, and they did a season entitled Charles Manson's Hollywood, and it basically is a 12-episode series just following the life of Charles Manson from his birth to what went down with the Manson murders to his prosecution. I thought I knew everything there was to know about the whole story. So for those true crime advocates that are really into this stuff, I cannot recommend this podcast series or season enough. It definitely deserves some accolades. I just re-listened to it upon this movie coming out, and it's just fantastic. You guys have to check it out if you're interested at all in the Manson saga. All right, so that pretty much sums up our review. I quickly want to just talk Oscar thoughts for this film. Yeah, it's crazy to think about, but it's coming up in like half a year, and it's something to think about because this movie hit me so hard. I love the movie so much. I wanted to talk about it. So I think this will be a Best Picture nominee for sure, especially since they've raised the amount of nominees that are included in the past decade. I think it's like upwards of 10 movies are considered at this point. I think that I would be highly surprised if this was not. This will certainly be a nominee. I don't know if I think this movie's a little crazy and a little outrageous for the Academy. I don't know. I don't know if they could handle it, but I think it'll certainly be in the conversation, but I unfortunately do not see it winning. Leo better be nominated for this movie for Best Actor. I would be super surprised if he wasn't. He did a fantastic job in this movie. He needs to be nominated. Obviously, we don't know who his competition's going to be, but if Leo's not nominated for Best Actor, we're all boycotting the Oscars. I'm saying it now. I'll make the decision for you. If he's not nominated, we're out of there. We're boycotting the Oscars. I think Pitt certainly deserved his nomination for supporting, which is weird to say because he was almost just main character B. He was like lead actor B in this movie, but I guess he should be nominated. I guess for supporting actor, honestly. And if memory serves me right, I don't think Brad Pitt's ever won an Oscar. So I would love, as much as I would love to see Leo win for this, I might love to see Brad Pitt, win more for supporting actor for this. Cliff Booth was so awesome. He was such a awesome role in this movie. All right, so I believe Quentin Tarantino will be nominated once again for Best Director in this movie, and I don't know what competition again is going to look like. I would love for him to win, but he doesn't tend to. I don't think he's ever won for Best Director, so maybe this will be it. But I'm not going to count my chickens, honestly. We shall see. We shall see who the competition is. Maybe Scorsese will be there for The Irishman. Maybe I don't know what else will be there, but this was. I fucking love this movie, and I would love to see him win for this for a project that he referred to as his magnum opus. I think give it to him, but we'll see when we get there in February or whatever. Now, most importantly here, this movie's a shoe in to not be nominated, but to win Best Original Screenplay. Tarantino's won Best Original Screenplay twice thus far. Once for Pulp Fiction, and his second was for Django. But I mean, this gives Pulp. I like Pulp Fiction probably better, but this gives Pulp Fiction a run for its money as far as screenplay goes. I will be highly upset if this movie wins one award. It needs to be Best Original Screenplay. Come on, guys, let's give Tarantino the hat trick for Best Original Screenplay. And finally, I just want to mention that I couldn't imagine this not being nominated for costume design, but that's usually a pretty competitive category at the Oscars, so we shall see. When it comes time, we'll be talking about this again, and we'll see what we get out of nominations for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I want to raise the question. So Quentin Tarantino says he's making 10 films overall in his career, and then he's retiring. This is number 9. So, guys, what do you want to see out of this final? What do you want to see out of number 10 here? I mean, this is so hard to focus on in the wake of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Honestly, at this point, I would love to hear from you guys. I would love to hear what you come up with, but all I could come up with at this point in the wake of just seeing Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and just being so pumped up about this movie is just, I want one more original Tarantino type story, but I want to see it with the most star-studded cast he's ever possibly put together. Like, I want it to minimize the cast in this movie, and I think anyone in Hollywood that hears this is going to be it for Quentin will probably likely sign on. But that's all I could say is I want an original Tarantino script. I want an original Tarantino story with just an absolute star-studded cast. And I can't imagine a cast that could, outdo this one here for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. This film just had the perfect mix to honestly, become my favorite movie of all time. Between the setting, the cast, and the story. I love just pieces about actual Hollywood. But I mean, it didn't quite accomplish that much. I mean, what could you say? It's not my favorite movie of all time. I'm really excited to go see it again in the theaters. But what else can I say except I truly love this film. I just gotta gush for a minute. I gotta just say that Quentin Tarantino is absolutely the person responsible for launching my deeper interest and appreciation for films and just the Hollywood industry. He was the first director I got into, and he was the first career in Hollywood that I religiously followed. So fuck man, I can't thank him enough for not only this movie but just the movies that I love and grew up on watching. Once Upon a Time, Tarantino is king. Let's get to our categories. Category 1, who won the movie? I could easily say that it was, Leo DiCaprio as Rick Dalton, Brad Pitt as Cliff Booth. I couldn't imagine anyone else in both of these roles. They were absolutely fantastic. Their performances were touching, relatable, and hilarious, but I have to go with Tarantino. Quentin Tarantino wins this movie simply for just envisioning this film, bringing us all back in time to visit Hollywood circa 1969, and I'm going to leave it at that. Category 2, the Pantheon. Where does this movie stand within this director's filmography? This is a tough one, and I've been going back and forth on this since seeing the movie, and it's really hard. I could see this falling anywhere from... It's definitely in my Tarantino top 5. I could see this falling anywhere from 5 to 3. So just upon first watch, my Quentin Tarantino top 5 movies of all time are as follows. Number 5, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Number 4, Inglourious Bastards. Number 3, Reservoir Dogs. Number 2, Kill Bill Volume 1. And number 1, Pulp Fiction. Alright, it's time for our film fact. I'm going to hit you with a couple just because there's so many in this movie. Number 1, Margot Robbie portrayed Sharon Tate in the film. She wore some of Sharon Tate's real jewelry that Sharon Tate's sister Deborah gave to Robbie after she gave Tarantino her blessing to make this movie. Second, the Cadillac in this movie. That's what it was. It was a Cadillac. All right. Cadillac in this movie actually belongs to Michael Madsen, who had a small cameo in the movie. It also appeared, the same Cadillac appeared in Reservoir Dogs, which was obviously Quentin Tarantino's first movie. This Cadillac was driven by Madsen in Reservoir Dogs. Number 3, it's very rare for Quentin Tarantino to have some scenes that contained improvisation. He does not particularly like that, but actually the main scene I talked about for Rick Dalton when he forgets his lines in Lancer, again, there's another one. It was Lancer that they were filming. That's what I thought. He rants himself privately in his trailer. That whole scene where he's just berating himself, that was apparently that was unscripted, and I'm learning that now, and I can't believe that. That's so awesome, and that just really speaks to Leo's range, man. Leo's so awesome. That's so cool. Tarantino worked on this screenplay for 5 whole years. Alright, it's time for see, stream, or skip. I think you guys could probably guess what I'm going to say, but if I can convince even one person to go see this film in theaters, then I say this whole podcast, not this episode, but this entire podcast, to me, is a success. Go see this film in theaters today. Okay, the official exit music for a film rating, 1 to 10. I'm gonna give Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Quentin Tarantino's 9th film, a solid 9 out of 10. And you know what that means. Avengers Endgame was given an 8 earlier. And that means we have a new Rosebud champion, which crowns the running best movie of the year. Here's your winner and the new Rosebud champion as best running movie of 2019, Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. You're now the movie to beat. And all upcoming films coming later, Irishman, Rise of Skywalker, whatever else, guys, bring your A game because this one's going to be a hard one to top. So I guess that brings us to our the end of the show and our coming attractions, a look at what's to come ahead. The only films I could tell we will certainly be doing in the months ahead and in the remainder of the year, I guess it's like the second half of the year now, is I know The Irishman is going to premiere on Netflix sometime in the fall. I don't think there's a concrete date out there yet for that. But then, as I just said before too, The Rise of Skywalker, the new Star Wars film, I think that comes out the week of Christmas, and I could almost certainly assure that that'll be our final review of the year. But there will definitely most likely be some a couple in there that we're not mentioning now. Like I know The Lighthouse comes out in October. That looks really cool. And Three from Hell, the third installment of the House of Thousand Corpses Rob Zombie series, and Richard Linklater has Where'd You Go, Bernadette coming out later this summer. Who knows what we're gonna still see this year, but this certainly isn't even close to the end for the 2019 film year. There will certainly be more episodes to be had. Anyways, guys, I can't thank you enough for sticking around for this. I know this was specifically a long episode, but it had to be. They certainly won't usually be this long, but this movie absolutely deserved the time it's got. I just wish that I just hope I did it justice, honestly, because this is going to be a movie. This is Quentin Tarantino said on his own interview recently that he loves going to the movies. He never knows, just because you never know, is this going to be a memorable time? Is this going to be a shitty movie that you forget in the next week? It's always just that randomness of what the film going experience is going to be. But this is absolutely one that I will absolutely remember. This film blew me away, and I can't say enough positive stuff about it. Absolutely a top 5 Tarantino movie. He did it again. What could we say? And I mean, what do you expect? He's fantastic. Anyway, you guys, thanks for sticking with me. This concludes the exit music for a film exit review of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Quentin Tarantino's 9th film. And remember, guys, keep going to the movies.